Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the first of our webinars that ASI is going to be hosting in regards to our Clevertouch boards, which you see standing behind me. And thank you for taking the time in joining in. We're doing a session today on our floating toolbar, a floating toolbar 101. And everything we're talking about today in our 20-minute window is talking about how can we use our floating toolbar to aid with what we call our teaching flow. How can we seamlessly transition from one thing to another thing in our teaching so we don't interrupt those moments with our students to stop and pause and do something. Our floating toolbar is really designed to really help that flow within our teaching. So as you can see behind me and on your screen here, our floating toolbar is floating around our screen like this. It's wherever you need it, because when I don't want it, I can throw it away to the edge of the screen now. And when I get it back, all I have to do is hold two fingers onto my screen, and then it's there wherever I am. So I don't have to stop and interrupt my lesson to go, where is my toolbar to do that thing that I want to do? It's right there straight away, ready for me, just by holding two fingers down on the board. Now, floating toolbar is dynamic. It will open down or it will open across wherever there's room to operate and open it up. Now, the order is always the same. Our order is always coming off our floating toolbar pencil, so it means that everything is in the same position where we left it. Now, we can change those positions once you figure out what the tools that you're going to use on a regular basis. You can adjust them. You can turn them off and you can turn them on based on what you are going to use. So you will only see the tools that you are going to use on a regular basis. And you can do that by long pressing on any of the icons, apart from the house one. When you long press on the house one, it launches up the Google Assistant, or it launches up an assistant that goes onto the panel. So we don't press on that one to adjust our floating toolbar. And I can take off and I can put on a number of options and rearrange by holding an icon and dragging it up and dragging it down. So it's in the position that suits me the best for teaching. Now, I've put mine in a specific order on the board, and you can see our first icons coming off our pencil are a back icon, a home icon, a HDMI icon, and two little windows together. Those four icons are really designed to help us navigate around our board quickly. So these four, you may turn some off, you may turn some on, but they're the ones that help us navigate around our board quickly and easily to get to where we need to go. The back arrow here at the top is like a backward step in what we've been doing. If I'm on a web page and I click that option there, it takes me back like the back browser of my web page. If I want to come out of a settings menu, I can press the back button and it takes me back a few steps in my board. The house icon will always take me back to the landing screen of your panel. So whether you're running an application or you're running Clevershare, if I click that home button, it'll always take me back to the screen that we're seeing now, which is our home screen, to reorientate where we are. It's a great way of opening a new application because I've got my applications I want to use regularly on my desktop there. And it's a great way of resetting if you ever get lost. The next one down is our HDMI symbol. It's a universal HDMI symbol there. And what this does is this opens up our input switcher. It's a quick way to flick between our different inputs on our board, whether we plug something into a HDMI cable or a USB-C cable. It always appears with a blue circle and a blue dot if something is plugged into that particular port there, and it will switch straight to it when we tap on it. It's also a great way of adjusting the volume really quickly. It's a great way of adjusting our volume really quickly because sometimes you just can't find your remote in time to turn down the volume. Sometimes you need to quickly turn the volume of something you're playing down, and I've got to turn that up and down. Now, our floating toolbar is fantastic in that sense because if I'm playing something from my computer, through a HDMI cable or a USB-C cable, our floating tool is an overlay layer that sits on top of everything. Whether I am sharing something from an external device like a computer or a microscope, or I'm sharing my lab through our Clevershare platform, What it does is it sits in a top layer on top of everything. So you will always have access to these tools. So no matter where I am, I can quickly turn the volume up or down of my board without the use of the remote. Because sometimes it's just never where you need it to be. The next one along is our active windows. So what those active windows do is it means that we can quickly switch between our active windows that we have on our panels. So if I want to quickly switch over to a whiteboard that I have open, I can tap on that, flick over to a whiteboard and continue on where I am. So it's very much like the Alt tab or the Apple, the Command tab of our devices where we flick in between open tabs. It's a quick way of jumping between different applications on my board that I have open. They're the 4 ones that we talk about when we're navigating our board. So we can go back a few steps. We can click the home button to go back home. We have the HDMI symbol here. This blue one here, HDMI symbol to switch our inputs and adjust our volumes quickly. And we have the active tabs, which is those 2 windows on top to switch between open applications on our board. The next 3 that I have here are our freeze tool, our zoom tool, and our quick annotate tool. What our freeze tool does, if I'm on a web page, so I'm going to flick over to my web browser here. If I'm on a web page or actively doing something on my board, I can control my board here. Or if I have something playing on my external display, whether it's a panel, whether it's a laptop or an iPad sharing or something else sharing onto my screen, if I click freeze, it locks the screen down. It's one of those old tricks that we used to have on the old projectors when we click freeze in the projector, switch to the new application on our computer, then click unfreeze to bring up that new information, very much like that. It means that it locks the screen in place. We can do what we need to do on an external device and then click unfreeze and we're displaying that new contact there. The next option is our zoom tool, which is that magnifying glass with a plus in the middle of it. That allows us to zoom in on objects that we can't necessarily normally zoom in on. So if we're showing a video or a PowerPoint presentation or something that a web page that doesn't quite zoom in properly, what it does is it takes a screenshot of our board and then allows me to zoom right in and move around that particular image effortlessly without adjusting the screen size or resolution of a video or whatever we're playing. So it allows us to focus in on different parts of our screen without interrupting the content on the board there. And the last one is what we call is our quick annotate tool. This opens up a new window, as we can see, our new little menu bar here, and that gives us the option to quickly annotate over the content on our board, whether it is a video. So we could pause a video, we could pause a PowerPoint presentation, we can pause a simulation that we're running on our computer and then annotate over the top of that quickly. I can switch the colors by tapping the pencil there. I can circle in my different colors. I can do the highlighter as well and do like that. I do have some different colors that I can choose my highlighter. I can use that setting cog on the right-hand side to choose my 4 colors. Unfortunately, you only can choose 4, so you have to pick your top favorite colors that you want to use, and you can adjust the size of the pen that you're writing with there. Now that stays every time you're on your board. So once you choose your colors, they're locked in until you adjust them later on. I can also rub out what I'm doing with the palm of my hand if I didn't want that particular note there, or I can click the clear button to wipe them all away. Now we use this as our quick annotation tool rather than a full annotated teaching lesson where we write all whiteboard notes on top of something, because it's designed really to highlight teaching. Whether I want to say, let's do these particular questions, I'll put my pen back on, I want to do these particular questions on an activity sheet, or don't forget about this when you're doing your task that you're supposed to be doing in your classroom setting. You can export that though. Sometimes you go a little bit deep and we want the students to have a copy of what's on the board. There are a couple of ways to do that. You can click the save icon. That'll save a copy to the board and it will require you to navigate through the Finder to export that either through a USB if you're allowed to use those, or in another space that you can copy that out to. You can click to a cloud device, so you can attach it if you have a cloud account attached to your board. You can save it directly to that cloud account. But before you do that, have a chat to your IT department about the security around connecting cloud accounts up to your board. The easiest way I found, though, is that QR code. That QR code, when scanned, what that will do is that will provide a copy of that in a web browser. Bring it up to my little camera up here so you can see a little bit. Right up there, it allows me to save that image to whatever device I have, whether it's a student device, whether it's yours as a teacher wanting to take a copy on your phone to put somewhere else. But it's a quick way of getting that annotation off to be able to use somewhere else on your panel. And to close that down, all I need to do is click that X button and that's closed down, and I can continue interacting with my material there, which is awesome. A couple other things we have in our floating toolbar is we have this spanner icon here. This spanner icon here has access to a number of teaching classroom tools that we like to use on a regular basis in our classroom. And the good fun one to start with is our spotlight. Sometimes we just want to highlight a particular content on our board. I can adjust the settings here, and I can highlight particular areas that I want to focus in on a content for my teaching. So I might want to focus about this part here. I might make it a little bit bigger so we can get more content in there. And I can move around my board, highlighting particular learning environments, learning content that I would like to highlight as part of my lesson. The other two tools here are our inbuilt timer, and I'll put them both up here, a timer and a stopwatch. We do have a stopwatch running there that can run on the screen, sitting there where I can do some lap times if I needed to do that. If I tap out of my stopwatch, you can see it minimizes down to a little window at the top there, that what that does is just sits in the background running on top of everything that I'm running, whether it is a lesson, a video, a PowerPoint, an external thing, it sits up there. I can tap on it to bring it out, and I can close that down as well. And I do have an inbuilt timer ready to go. So what's really good about that is I don't have to go to a website, I don't have to load a separate application. It sits on top of everything that I'm running. I can make it full screen, so it's ready to go. But sometimes the full screen is really important. I understand the need of that sometimes in classrooms. But what it does do, though, is it sometimes can cause a little bit of anxiousness in students having that timer, especially for a long task that isn't requiring that timer to be in their face. But you want to keep track of time for an activity. Just like the stopwatch, I can tap on my timer and minimize my timer to make it quite visible in any classroom at the top of my screen there. I can make that sit there, and I'll just run there the whole way time until it gets to 0. When it's in the last 12 seconds, as we saw then, it'll go to red. And then it will basically, when we get to 0, I'll show you when it gets to 0 here. 2, 1, comes back up. Plays a nice chime, which you may not have been able to hear with my noise cancelling microphone that I have here. But what it does do is it's a nice kind of like a bell chime rather than an alert, so it's not as aggressive as students. But as I said, instead of having to go to a website or open a different application, 1, 2, 3 clicks, and I'm going to have a timer ready to go in my classroom, which is fantastic. The other options that we have within our space here is a quick access into our whiteboard. So I'm in the middle of talking about a lesson. I want to go into a whiteboard. I can tap that whiteboard icon, and it will automatically open up the active icon that we've gone to. At the moment, I've flicked over into Link's whiteboard here. And the lastly, but not least in our, or 2 things more to go, I'm going to use my active tabs, flick back over into my lesson that I'm teaching about cells to year 6 here, is our scissors with our dotted lines across the top there. That is what we call our snip on our interactive whiteboards here. Teachers understand that snip to the amount of times I've been in doing training, and every teacher puts their hands up when they use this snip. It's like the second favorite tool of a teacher. But but we can have that in the middle of our lesson. What makes our snip tool really powerful though is it can work over whatever I have on my screen, whether it's an external laptop plugged in, whether it's a microscope plugged into our board, whether a student is sharing their work via Clevertouch. This snip tool operates and takes a copy of whatever is on my screen. So in this particular case here, I'm going to run my snip here. And I'll show you what it will do. I'm going to take a snip of this particular image here, and all I need to do is click insert. What it does is it takes a copy of that image and pastes it directly into my active whiteboard that I might have open here. I can then flick back across into my active whiteboard here. I could scroll somewhere else. I could have another option open. I'll just, for the sake of this exercise here, I'm just going to grab that image there at the top. And when I click it again, it's taken my second image into my whiteboard here. And as you can see, then I've got a really good tool to be able to take snapshots of what I'm teaching into a whiteboard to then later on be able to go and then continue my annotations and save my whiteboard for another lesson. So it's a really great tool that sits in what we call our floating toolbar, which is active on top of everything. Now, the very last one I haven't spoken about heaps yet, and I haven't mentioned, that's our lock tool. What that does is that locks our board to be able to need a PIN code to be able to re-access the content on our board. Now, that would require you working with your IT department about the security for setting that up, because some of your boards may be able to be signed in with an RFID card, or it might require a PIN to sign into that. So I would have a conversation with your IT department about using a lock function on your specific board there. So I hope we've learned something new and something exciting that we can take into our classroom using that floating toolbar. And as I said, it's all designed to keep our teaching flow smooth by accessing annotation tools, flicking between applications, being able to use some of those timers straight away, and snipping content directly into a whiteboard to continue on in a deeper lesson sense. Thank you much for joining today in our first ASI Clevertouch webinar. We're hosting another one soon at the end of November, talking about our AI tools built into our Links whiteboard software. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on our next one. Bye.